Time now for another vlog. And if you have a vlog suggestion that I've yet to do, feel free and send it my way via the comment section below, Twitter, Facebook, or Discord. All the links below in the description section. And as I always like to say, every month whenever we do a new vlog, I've done quite a few already over the past 3 years now. And I'm very appreciative to all of you that are subscribed to the vlogs channel and have watched my vlogs. But if you have a vlog suggestion, be sure and check the playlist first, because I have done quite a few vlogs already covering a great deal many subjects. Now, if there happens to be a vlog topic you think I should revisit, or maybe do a different take on, a different spin, that's kind of cool too. If you have whatever idea you happen to have for a vlog, feel free and send it my way. Because I do enjoy doing these vlogs, but the problem, as I've mentioned before, whenever I don't exactly have an idea every week for something different, something new, because all the other ones have covered almost every other subject or topic. Maybe not all subjects or topics known, but quite a few. Let me know if you got anything in mind. But first, like I said, check the playlist, because you never know, maybe a vlog that you want that I've already done. And if you want to keep it anonymous, that too can be arranged. All you got to do is DM me your anonymous vlog suggestion via the Facebook page, Twitter, or Discord. Alright, so today we're going to talk about being an outsider. And I guess you could say this is going to be a sequel of sorts to another vlog I did a long time ago, maybe a year ago, called Belonging. How a lot of us, most people are trying to belong somewhere. They're trying to be part of something, part of a group, a clique, a family, a club. You get the idea. I had this thought the other day because I've been having kind of a rough go of it the past few days. I've been doing better, but previously I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's fatigue or just I've had a few things on my mind. But it started making me feel like an outsider. Now, some of you are probably like, well, how can you feel like an outsider? I mean, those of you that are part of my community are probably like, well, you're not an outsider. You're like the guy, You're the big cheese or the big salt, or you're the reason for the season. Okay, I'm not trying to make myself the center of the freaking universe, okay? But the name of the vlog is my vlog. And the name of the gaming channel is named after me. It's no secret. But yeah, I do feel like an outsider sometimes. Even sometimes within my own community. And that's nothing against any of you in the community, because you all are awesome. And it's just, I guess we have to go back to the beginning to understand why I feel like an outsider sometimes. And even when I'm surrounded by people, whether it's my community or by some friends or family, why do I still feel like an outsider at times? And I know this is a tale that has been told many times as I have to pull myself back on the road. I'm suing that guy, by the way. That was totally his fault. But it goes all the way back to the very beginning of my life. Well, maybe not entirely the beginning. Most of you know the story. I was born and my mom died before my second birthday. I didn't get to know my mom. You know that story. So I'm not looking for the sympathy. I'm not looking for that. I'm not trying to milk that. I just giving you guys a starting point for how I feel like an outsider. So first and foremost, growing up without knowing my mom, when a lot of other people, did have their mom in their life, that in one way makes me feel like an outsider, because I never got to know my mom, even though I know a few things about her from what other people have told me about her. It's still not the same thing. So right there, that was the first thing that made me feel like an outsider. The second thing was the fact that both sides of my family are from Northwest Louisiana. However, at the time, my dad was working for an oil company called Halliburton. He was a chemical engineer. And, of course, he had to go where the job was. And my mom and dad ended up in East Texas. at a couple of towns, but the town I ended up growing up in, I was also an outsider. My family was not from that small town in East Texas, and it wasn't a tiny town, but it wasn't a big town either. And it was a town where you kind of know people, or you know families, and families are connected over generations. And I didn't really have any of those connections. Yeah, I ended up making some friends growing up in that small town. But at the same time, I always felt like an outsider, even in that town, because I wasn't from that town. Years later, my dad did remarry a couple of times, and one of those marriages produced my half sisters, which I don't consider to be half sisters, by the way. But the difference is, see, like their mother and their mother's family was from that town, so they had that connection, which I lacked. So, like their sister, which is my sister, I've mentioned I have three sisters, and they all are my sisters, even though it doesn't matter. But the point is, like, they all had more of a connection with that town because their family had history in that town. Well, the mother side of that family. But I have no history with that town, just my own personal history. My family was outsiders. And it's one of the reasons why my dad's business struggled to thrive, because he didn't have those inside connections. I mean, he tried his best to run his company, his business. After he got out of Halliburton, he went into nursery and landscaping. And most of the time, he was barely, surviving, barely putting food on the table, providing the basic necessities for us. Sometimes it was so bad where, he couldn't pay the electric bill, and unfortunately the power got turned off a few times growing up. It is what it is, I'm sure a lot of you have been in that situation before, sadly. But, yeah, I mean, I just felt like an outsider. Even though I had some friends, even though I did have my sisters, I had always grown up an outsider. And the huge chunk of my family, besides my sisters, were from this area. A lot of them have moved away. There's still a few left. But I didn't grow up with all those cousins because, my grandma had a whole bunch of kids, a whole bunch of brothers and sisters, siblings of my dad. And so about 13 aunts or uncles total, I think, somewhere in that ballpark. And a lot of them have had kids. So a whole bunch of cousins, tons of cousins. But even though there were some that I really liked and consider myself closer to than others, the truth is, I didn't really spend nearly as much time growing up with a lot of my cousins as they did with each other. So another example of me kind of being an outsider, even within the larger echelon of my family. So whenever I did manage to barely graduate from high school, at least I graduated, even though it was at the bottom of my class, I pulled myself together, turned myself around just enough so I could graduate and get out of that town and move away. Even though I had friends there and some good times, there were also bad times. But moving here, when I was, 18, 2 weeks after I graduated from high school, and I spent plenty of years over the summers and winter breaks visiting my grandparents, my papa, my granny, and I'd also go visit my grandma. My grandma was my dad's mom. She's still around. My papa's currently living in another state with his second wife. My granny sadly passed away in 2003. But when I moved here, I was kind of hoping that I'd be able to, make some, friendships or create some bonds with my cousins that I didn't really get to spend as much time with until, Christmas breaks or family reunions. But a lot of them that were around my age were also preparing to move away and do their own thing in their lives. So I never had the opportunity to really make a true connection with a lot of those cousins of mine. And so I kind of missed out on that, unfortunately. And, there's some I like, there's some I don't like. And I'm sure a lot of them probably don't really care about me, and that's fine. It is what it is. But it just goes back to this whole story of how I've always felt like an outsider. And, from not fitting in school to, being friends with the nerds, being the outsiders, the freaks, whatever we were called, I wasn't a prep. I was not a redneck. I was not part of any other group. I tried to be in athletics. That didn't work out so well. I mean, I was a short guy. I mean, what was I expecting? I don't know, but I made a few mistakes in high school that alienated me even more. Stupid things you do as a kid, acts of revenge that end up getting you in trouble. Suspended and disliked by people. But in hindsight, I understand. But the saying is, two wrongs don't make a right, and revenge is hardly ever the answer, even if something's done wrong to you. Yeah, but anyways, I digress. So, I've learned from my mistakes, and becoming an adult, I felt like it was a clean slate for me. Moving here, 18 years old, starting college. But once again, I was in the same scenario, because a lot of my cousins had moved away. Some of them were still here, but I never had the opportunity to really get close to them. I tried to. It didn't really work out. I mean, we all have our lives. They had their lives. They're focused on college or going off to the military or doing their thing, starting a family or whatever. And I was focusing on my thing, college as well, working a part-time job for my grandfather as a clerk. And then eventually I ended up focusing on telecommunications in college and interning in radio, and eventually I got a part-time job in radio because of my internship, and then more opportunities came my way. But so I always felt like an outsider when it came to most of my family, not my sisters obviously, but with the larger echelon of the family. But even in radio, I guess I still had that issue, right? I grew up feeling like an outsider for so long that I was always trying to get myself into a group, right? Part of a group. Or maybe part of me didn't like being part of groups, but always trying to get myself involved more. Now, obviously, I made some really good friends in radio. I learned a lot of important life lessons in radio and a lot of experiences and a lot of things that I ended up doing in radio I take with me for the rest of my days. But at the same time, there was part of me that still felt like an outsider. And it wasn't anyone else's fault that I felt that way. It's just the way, I guess, my path had gone. From the very beginning, it just seemed like I was destined to be kind of on the outside. While other people would go off partying and drinking, I didn't really care for drinking because I knew about even in my early 20s, I knew that I had a hereditary liver condition similar to my mom had. And I knew that even back then, drinking was bad. So game froze right there. But, yeah, eventually I did kind of give in and did start drinking a little bit, and that was probably not a good idea. But when you have people like that you work with, co-workers, even in radio or any other like professional field you go into, they develop a bond whenever they're going and doing stuff together, like going out, drinking, partying, and whenever you're not a drinker, you see it a little bit differently. You don't really want to be around people that drink because you see it a little differently. You're not enjoying it the way they're enjoying it because you're not buzzed. You're not under the influence to whatever rhyme or degree. And so being sober and watching people make fools of themselves, just drinking, carrying on, it's alien to you. You don't really understand. And to them, they probably see you as the same way. Like, oh, like we're all having this good time, and here's this guy just sitting here not drinking. And are they just oblivious to you anyways because they're having such a good time drinking and carrying on and whatnot. Because most of the time, I would be the one that was the designated driver for all the fellow DJs and staff because I obviously didn't drink until a few years later when I decided to start drinking. Whenever I came across some hard cider, that became my Achilles heel. But even then, I had always felt like an outsider. And despite my best efforts, I still feel like one. Even to this day. And I guess also it comes down to my political views. I feel like there was a time whenever I was politically, I know I have the political channel back up and running now, but real quickly, I was more politically involved in I guess you could say one of the primary political parties in my country, the Republican Party. Not anymore, so Please put down the milkshakes. Calm down. But in 2004, I became disillusioned with the Republican Party over the lies of Iraq, and I never could see myself being a Democrat, even though I do now have some liberal tendencies. I'm more of a moderate, as I've mentioned time and time again, but I'm also a bit of a libertarian still at heart. Some conservatism. I'm a little bit of a mixture of things. But at the time, in 2004, I was trying to find... I felt like an outsider to the Republican Party, so I was trying to find somewhere else to go. And that's when I started becoming a libertarian. And then in 2007, 2008, I started supporting Ron Paul, which was I guess you could say he was a Republican, but he was a constitutionalist and a libertarian. He ran for president in 2008 and 2012. I supported him both times, but once again, another prime example of being feeling like an outsider because he wasn't a mainstream candidate. And so I never really understood mainstream politics. I never understood why so many voters, so many party goers, whether it's Republican or Democrat, would rally around what I would see as terrible choices. And all too often, that's what I would see as the winners. Terrible driving as well. But yeah, terrible choices in candidates. And it just, once again, I guess it just made me feel like an outsider because I felt like, hey, and we're all entitled to our opinion. I don't claim to be right. But I believed in the candidates I believe in. And you could say fast forward to this election cycle. I'm in the same situation. I support Tulsi Gabbard, a long shot Democratic presidential candidate. No, I'm not a Democrat, but I am supporting a Democrat presidential candidate. But because I believe in her, But it's sad because she's at the bottom of the polling. But I think she's the best choice. I mean, she's trying to reach across the aisle, and she's trying to bring people to the table in this extremely divisive time in our country. Well, my country, the U.S., between the right and the left, continuing to try and pull the nation further and further apart. You have this young congresswoman. Well, she's about my age. Okay, so maybe I'm not young anymore. But she's also serves in the military. She's a major in the Army National Guard. I mean, there's a lot going there for her. She's very smart, and she reaches across the aisle, and in my opinion, she's the best choice. But unfortunately, it seems like the rest of the Democratic Party and the rest of the country in general don't agree. Of course, at the same time, I did not support Trump or Hillary. In 2016, I did despise both of them as candidates, and yet who were the top two candidates in 2016? Yeah, so once again, another prime example of things that happen, that transpire, that make me feel like an outsider. Now, sometimes, I don't know, I go back and forth. On one hand, sometimes I think it's cool to be an outsider, to feel like an outsider. Like, yeah, I'm an outsider. I ain't inside that box that the rest of you are inside. I see things that none of you see. I'm here, I'm there. At least I have a view and opinion on things. I'm not just going along with what everybody else believes because it's towing the party line. But on the other side, it does sometimes feel a little lonely because I do feel left out a lot of times. And it's very easy for me to feel like I'm being left out. And it's gotten to the point over the years where I expect to be left out. And so I don't even bother. And a lot of things that happen, like get-togethers and stuff, I tend to avoid them because I already feel like I don't belong there anyways. I feel like an outsider, like family gatherings. Like when my dad was still alive, during the family reunions and Christmas parties and other get-togethers, a lot of times he would be the center of attention, because he always knew how to carry the room. I mean, my aunts and uncles, most of them are pretty good about carrying the room. They all very loud, very opinionated. Gee, I wonder where I get that from. But my dad was really good about it. And I never was like that. And so I guess it just always made me feel uncomfortable. It always made me feel like I don't feel like I really belong here because I hate to say this, and I'm sure most of my family are good people. Most of them are strangers to me. Most of them I may have spent a few hours hanging out with. If you were to tally it all together, maybe I'm a little bit closer with some of them than others. And some of them I obviously don't care for. And probably a lot of them don't care for me. And I get that. But despite my efforts to try and I guess be involved and become involved, whether it's with family or even trying to be part of some sort of religion, once again, I feel like an outsider. Because there have been numerous occasions where I have tried generally to believe in something. Whether it was, being a Catholic, I was raised Catholic. I became more involved in Catholicism once I grew up and I moved here because some of my aunts are still Catholic. Some of them have also become Protestants, but in the end, I started questioning things. I'm like, okay, I don't believe this. Okay, I don't believe that. And look, if people believe it, that's fine. I'm just talking about my point of view, not saying I'm right or wrong. And so I started questioning things. I started seeing hypocrisy within the church and all this crap and all that junk. And I got to the point where I stopped believing. I'm just like, I don't believe in this anymore. And then I've also been swayed over the years to try a different denomination, like being a Baptist, because my papa is Baptist, and several people close to him are Baptist. And so for a while, they tried to convince me to go to a Baptist church. And I kind of broke down one day, and I tried it. And it was alien to me, because I guess I was raised with Catholicism. I was used to the way the Catholics did things. But for the most part, there's a lot more similarities and differences between Catholicism and Baptists and Protestants, because it's all under the same religion. I'm not trying to get religious here, but I am, I guess. But it goes back to the same point. And I've tried to believe. I've tried reading the book. I have read it. And on numerous occasions in my, I guess you could say, darkest of hours, where I was desperate to find something to try to believe in, I tried. I did. But then the same problem would come up. I would eventually start questioning things and be like, I see inconsistencies here and there, and I don't know. And then I would stop believing again. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that there's something. I'm not an atheist. I guess you could say I'm more of an agnostic who kind of sort of believes in reincarnation, kind of making me once again feel like an outsider, because that's not really a primary religion, I guess, unless you count Hinduism, which I'm not a Hindu, but nothing against Hinduism or any other religion out there. But I feel like what I believe most people wouldn't understand. I mean, I do believe that there's something. I believe that there is life beyond death. I believe that there's some sort of supreme being or God or gods or something. I don't believe in what I consider to be man-made religions, because I think if there is a God, I don't think God would want his children fighting over God, whether God's a him or her, an it, a thing, whatever. So I've always had that issue, and I've always had another issue with the idea that, God's going to reward this group of people for believing in him, or it, or her, but all the other groups are going to be punished. But all the other groups were also raised to believe in God. So like I said, I have a lot of issues, a lot of questions, and I know I'm never going to get the answers to most of the questions I have. But a lot of times all this stuff combined together makes me feel like an outsider. And I guess after my dad passed away, even though my dad and I, didn't always get along, and there were times when he was a pain, and there were a lot of times in the later years where it felt like we had reversed roles and I had become the dad. He was still my dad. I guess there was part of me that was used to having him in my life. And I guess once he was gone, then I was just like one less person, one less connection to the larger part of my family. Now I'm still, I guess you could say, still related to them, I guess. And I still have a connection with my sisters. They're trying to get me to move to Central Texas, not East Texas. I'm not going back to East Texas. Nothing against any of my viewers from East Texas, by the way, but I live there already. Not interested in moving back. But maybe Hill Country, maybe Central Texas to be closer to my sisters. But then they have their lives, right? They're both married. They're doing their things. They have their goals, their focuses. And despite them wanting me to live closer to them, I have to wonder, will it be any different? Can I actually integrate myself into their lives on a regular basis? Now, visiting them every now and then is one thing. But every day, do they really want to have me in their life every single day? Do they know what they would be getting themselves into? And I know I wouldn't see them every single day because, like I said, they got their jobs, they got their careers, they got their husbands, they got their thing. I get it. But I feel like those four, have kind of formed their own little thing, right? And I feel like even if I move, even if I change location to live closer to them, at the end of the day, I would still probably feel like an outsider. I mean, I'm in my late 30s. I'm still single. I've been in a few relationships. Obviously, none of them worked out. And for the record, I don't play the victim card. You know, some of them were bad. Not all of them. And I wasn't always the victim. And I say in most of the situations, you have to share the blame. You have to share the blame for the failures of those relationships. And those, in the end, those relationships obviously weren't meant to be. Even though maybe the 1, 2, or 3 that I would have really liked to have seen become something. It's just the way it is. But the fact that I've spent more of my life single than in a relationship also adds to that feeling of loneliness and being an outsider. Because by now, a lot of guys my age have either already been married, they already have kids, and they have kids that are almost adults by now, which is a really strange thought. But here I am, still single, still alone. I don't have anybody. I haven't been on a date in months. That one didn't go so well. But as the old saying goes, it's better to be single and happy some of the time or most of the time, and I know I've said this before, than in a miserable relationship or a terrible marriage. So that's always the way I look at it. But it still doesn't change the fact that there are times when it definitely sucks being single. And it adds to me feeling like I don't belong, where I feel like an outsider, where I feel like I'm not part of anything. Even in my own community sometimes I feel that way. And I don't know if I can really blame anybody for that. Because I know other groups have formed within the community and people go off and they do their own things and everybody's doing their own this and that, having fun, having a good time. And sometimes, unfortunately, drama and BS occurs. And I hate it when that happens. And I try to be, I guess, the sheriff, the mediator, the peacemaker to try and resolve things. And I feel like whenever BS and drama happens within my community, I feel like it causes, like, fractures, fissures, rifts, cuts. And there's times when I see it. People that used to get along don't get along anymore. And different people not associating with people that they used to, and then you see it, and that's the nature of humanity. You go long enough, and even the best of groups start to have division. Even the best of bands fall apart. It's human nature. And there are times when I feel like that seems to be happening within my own community. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just the typical thing that all groups and communities go through, ups and downs. There's always a bit of drama here and there, a bit of BS that communities have to deal with and get through in order to survive. And maybe by enduring it and allowing whatever wounds occurred to heal, the communities and groups are stronger for it in the long run. And I'd like to believe that. But whenever there's drama and BS and it feels like some people are not getting along and it's becoming more than people not getting along, it always feels like there's a calm before another storm approaching, then that makes me feel kind of, I guess, isolated at the top. And when I start feeling isolated and I feel like I don't know where to turn to, and you get tired of the drama and the BS, then you start kind of falling back on old habits, like being an outsider, where you're like, okay, well, I'm just getting tired of this crap, and I'm going to do my own thing, focus on this and that, and whatever, And you get used to being alone. You get used to being an outsider, especially if you've been one your whole life. It doesn't get easier, but I think human beings are meant to have other people in their lives, whether it's a companion, a partner, a lover, friends, family. You get the idea. I think we're meant to be like that. And I think that when people choose to be a loner or an outsider, they may act like that it's not a big deal, that's just the way they would prefer it. And maybe there's some people out there that are hermits, and some people have accused me of one day becoming a hermit, moving away somewhere in the middle of nowhere, maybe Montana. Maybe that'll still happen. I don't know. If I live long enough and I get fed up with society in general, which could happen, it's still, there's still a deal and a degree of loneliness you have to deal with. And it's something I've had to endure my whole life, because I guess I've never really felt like anybody truly relates to me, even though I understand that everyone has their own trials and tribulations. Everyone has gone through their own ups and downs and had their own degree of pain in various levels. But my journey has been one of good days and bad days, and overall there have been plenty of times when I felt like the only person I had was me. And I guess that day began whenever I lost my mom, when I was less than 2 years old, And growing up in a small town where my family wasn't from made it worse. And like being short, and that didn't help any. Because, in school, it's easy to be picked on. But fortunately, I learned to fight back. And sometimes maybe I fought back too much. But I've always been very opinionated. I've tried to bite my tongue more. And maybe that is another reason why I felt like an outsider, because I like to speak my mind. I like to get out there and tell people how it is. And not to the degree where I want to hurt somebody. There are definitely plenty of times when I do bite my tongue, when I'm like, okay, I'm not going to mention it because I know that's just going to hurt somebody's feelings, or it's going to cause a backlash. But over the years, I guess you get to the point where you're molded to that form that you come to accept. And while I try to be part of communities, I try to be part of things, at the end of the day, I have to ask myself the hard questions, like I have the past few days. Like, am I just destined to be an outsider no matter how hard I try? Whether it's with friends. I only have like a small handful of people I consider to be friends anymore. Maybe 3 in real life. I guess I consider some people within the community to be friendly. Acquaintances. Friends depends on the day or the week. Like, some days, you know how it goes with people. Good days, bad days. But it's just something I've had to go through. And for those of you that actually have somebody special in your life, like if it's a parent or a brother, a sister, a best friend, a partner, then be grateful that you have that person. Be grateful that you are part of something. If you're part of a group, if you're part of a family, if you're part of a community, be grateful to be part of that. And for those of you that also feel like an outsider sometimes, like I do, try to find ways to not always be an outsider. Maybe we're always destined to be an outsider, but we don't always have to be an outsider. It's not always a bad thing to be part of a community or be part of something. And you never know, if you're not too careful, you may accidentally one day find yourself part of a community, part of a family. Maybe one day I will as well. If I'm destined to move to Central Texas to be closer to my sisters and their husbands, maybe, just maybe, I will eventually cast aside the outsider. And maybe I'll finally feel like I belong again. Or then again, maybe I'll always be an outsider, but at the same time, I'm still their brother. And at the very least, I can still try to be part of their lives on a more regular basis. Or maybe I'm just meant to just hop in my truck and just drive. Just go somewhere. Just be an outsider and never look back when the time comes. Obviously, I've mentioned that in a previous video. What, my Wanderlust video? Yeah, there's also that drive and that desire. Maybe that goes hand in hand with me feeling like an outsider at times. But there's always that part of me that wants to be part of something, and that's always been the case. From wanting to be part of a family, to being part of a community, to being part of a group. And I've been in several groups, and if I'm to be honest, most of them didn't work out for me. Boy Scouts, FFA, debate club, local animal rescue group I helped found. Well, politics, that didn't work out so well for me either. I'm sure I'm missing a few on my list of groups that I have tried to belong to but ultimately failed to be part of. So yeah, that's me, the outsider. That's me, sometimes feeling like I'm looking on the outside with the way I was raised, the life experiences I've gone through, the good days, the bad days, shaping me, molding me, making me what I am. An outsider who tries to be part of a community, tries to be more, do better, eventually fit in. And I think that's something we all try to do. We all try to fit in. I don't want to conform. I don't want to, give up something that is essentially me, because I want to be authentic. I want to be real. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what? Even though you're alone, even though sometimes you feel sad and, desperate for attention and for somebody in your life, somebody to spend time with, to text on a regular basis, to go and watch a movie with, to Netflix and chill with, to go places with. There's been so many times whenever I've gone to visit my papaw, which I need to go visit him. I haven't seen him in a while. I need to go do that. Where I've wanted to have somebody special to take with me, But I don't have anybody. It's always me showing up. Just all me. My grandfather remarried. He started basically a new life for himself. So I feel like an outsider to that family, even though they're all good people. And, showing up and doing things with my sisters and their husbands, once again, I feel like an outsider. Because they have each other, right? My sisters have their husbands, and their husbands are pretty close. They're like good friends now. And so they have this tight-knit group, those four. And there's just something about odd numbers that always feels uneven. I mean, obviously, but more than just numerically. It's like the old saying goes, three's a crowd, and that's the way I've always felt. Whether it's three's a crowd or five's a crowd, or you get the idea. And I've always felt like the odd man out. The one that didn't have somebody, except for on very rare occasions. And those were often fleeting and ultimately didn't last. In hindsight, it's probably better than an alternative, and I think I'd probably be way worse off if I was still with any of them. And not entirely their fault, but maybe it's just the fact that me and them weren't meant to be. So yeah. Me, the outsider. Alone. Not wanting to be alone. Not always feeling alone, because I still have some people in my life. And in the end, that's the moral. Don't allow yourself to become an outsider. Don't end up like me. If you have the means, if you have the opportunity, if you have the capacity for change, if you're still young enough not to be an outsider, focus on those in your life that matter to you, family members, friends, those that you care for, those that care for you. And do your part to be part of their lives and be part of that group and that community that you're trying to form, whether it's a community of 2 or a community of 20 or 200 or 200,000 or whatever. Because it's important to have our own views and opinions, independent thought, to thy own self be true. But at the same time, I don't think we're meant to be alone. I don't think we're meant to be alienated. I don't think we're meant to be hermits or outsiders, even though some adapt, because human beings are capable of adapting to situations. And there are plenty out there that would disagree with me, that would be like, you know what, I'm a hermit. I've been independent my whole life. I've been solo, a bachelor, a bachelorette, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And to that, I'm I'm glad that you have figured out who you are and what you want. And in the end, I guess that's what's more important than anything. Figure out what you want. Figure out what makes you happy. And if that means you're happy being alone, if you're happy being independent, an outsider, a hermit, then that's fine. But I guess there's always been part of me that didn't want to be. But it seems like a series of events sent me down that path, as I've pointed out. Does it necessarily mean I'm destined to always be an outsider, or am I still truly an outsider? Or maybe it's just because I feel like an outsider over the past few days. Like things, real life, and other events have made me feel that way. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe other people don't see it the same way I see it. Maybe they see me as part of the community or part of the family, depending on who you talk to. But through my eyes, and that's the only way I can call this one, through my eyes, I've always seen myself as the outsider. Always trying, always striving to find something to belong to, something to be part of. I've tried and I failed. I've made friends along the way. I've lost friends along the way. I have fallen in love. I've had my heart broken. I have let people down, and people have let me down. And I'm going a little too long in this vlog. A little too long. Crashing all over the place. And story of my life. But in conclusion, my life could have always ended up way worse, despite, some of the bad things that transpired. So I have to embrace that there is something greater than all of us. I don't know what that is. Is there a rhyme to the reason? Is there a purpose for all this? Is there a reason why I am the way I am? I guess. Am I destined to always be like this if I keep going? I don't know. I really don't know. Because I can't predict the future. If I could, I'd be predicting me some winning lottery tickets. But that ain't going to happen. But I have to embrace that this is the path that I'm meant to be on. And whatever lies ahead for me, everything will work out the way it's meant to. If I'm meant to finally feel like I'm part of something one day, if I'm not already part of something, then it'll be revealed, or there'll be an epiphany, and somebody will just kindly tell me, hey, you are part of something. We think you're part of something. Sometimes it takes somebody to give you that perspective. Maybe tomorrow I'll meet somebody special that'll change my life forever. Probably not on a dating app. Probably not. But maybe it'll happen whenever I move to Central Texas if I'm meant to live closer to my sisters. Or maybe, just maybe, my wanderlust is meant to take over after my pets are gone, and I'm just meant to hop in my truck and drive off and go as far as I can. And if that's the case, then I guess ultimately I was destined to be an outsider.